All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series where we're going through another set of questions together and working them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe for all of our updates. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A technician is tasked with measuring and assessing a client's tantrum behavior. During a session, the technician starts a timer when the client begins crying and screaming and stops the timer when the client returns to a calm state. This information is recorded over multiple sessions to help with the assessment. What measurement is used in this scenario? So we're looking at measurement. And for measurement, we always want to determine first what is being measured. In this case, we know the technician is measuring client's tantrum behavior. We then want to know, are we measuring it continuously or discontinuously? Well, here, we're clearly going to be measuring it continuously because we're talking in terms of the full session with no mention of intervals. Finally, how is the technician conducting their measurement? Well, they're starting a timer when the client begins crying and screaming, and then stopping the timer when the client returns to a calm state. So from the onset to the offset of the behavior, the technician is measuring the time that the behavior lasted. So we know we're measuring time and we know we're measuring the length of time of a response. What measurement would that be? A, frequency. Frequency is going to be a count, how often something occurred. We're not measuring a count, we're measuring time, how long a response happened for. B, rate. Rate is also a frequency measurement just with time added. But since we aren't taking any sort of count or frequency, we can't be using B, rate. C, duration. Duration is the time from the beginning to the end of a response. That's what we're looking for here. A technician starts the timer when the client starts their tantrum and stops the timer when the tantrum is over. Whatever time we get is the duration of that tantrum behavior. And then D, automatic. Automatic is a function, not a measurement. It's a good example of why fluency is important. If you're fluent, then you know you shouldn't even be considering the answer automatic. So given our information, what measurement is used in the scenario? What's going to be C, duration. A company introduces a policy where employees who arrive late to meetings must stay an extra 15 minutes after the meeting to review the missed material. Over time, employees stop arriving late to meetings. What consequence is changing the employee's behavior? So we have a consequence question. And with consequence questions, we want to know, how is the behavior changing? We know we're focused on the employee behavior because the ultimate goal of a consequence is to change a behavior, either increase or decrease it. We know that over time, employees have stopped arriving late to meetings. So what has happened to the behavior? It's decreased because we know from the beginning of the question that the policy was to stop employees from arriving late. And how did they do that? How did they decrease arriving late? Well, they told the employees, or they require the employees to stay an extra 15 minutes. So one, we know the behavior decreased. And if the behavior decreased, it has to either be punishment or extinction. Reinforcement will never decrease a behavior. Two, was the consequence added, removed, or withheld? Because if it was withheld, then that would be extinction. Well, clearly this wasn't withheld because if you arrive late, you are then given or you're then tasked with staying 15 minutes after the meeting. So that requirement is being added as a consequence. So when we add something that decreases behavior, what do we call that? A, negative punishment. Well, negative punishment is going to remove something that decreases behavior. And we're not removing it. We're adding the requirement of the 15 minutes. Extinction. Extinction is withholding reinforcement, what you're also not doing. Negative reinforcement. Well, it can't be reinforcement because we know the behavior decreased. So it has to be positive punishment because with positive punishment, We are adding something that is decreasing, not increasing. We're adding something that is decreasing the behavior. So the addition of the 15-minute requirement has decreased the arriving late to meeting behavior. The consequence is D, positive punishment. Which of the following answer choices best represents prompt fading? When we are prompt fading, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to slowly go from a very intrusive prompt to a less intrusive prompt because eventually we want to remove the prompt altogether because the prompt comes after the SD but before the response. So we want to remove this prompt eventually where we just have the SD and response. So we're going to look for the example where we are slowly taking away the prompt. A behavior technician introduces a token system to reinforce independent task completion during sessions. A doesn't discuss prompting. We're simply introducing a new intervention. So A does not fit. B, a behavior technician switches from using a picture card as a cue to acting as a model to prompt the client. Now, if we think about our prompt hierarchy, the most intrusive prompt is going to be errorless teaching and physical prompting. After that, we're going to have modeling. So going from a picture card, which is rather unintrusive, to full-on modeling the behavior is not fading the prompt. We're actually increasing the prompt in B. C, a behavior technician increases the intensity of reinforcement over time to encourage a client to perform a behavior independently. C is also not an example of fading or thinning. We're actually increasing the reinforcement. But additionally, that doesn't have to do with prompting, so C also doesn't fit. That leaves us with D, a behavior technician teaching a client to tie their shoes, starts with full hand-over-hand guidance, and ends only with verbal cues. In D, we are going from a full prompt, a full physical hand-over-hand prompt, to just verbal cues. That is a good example of fading out a prompt from an intrusive prompt to a less and less and less intrusive prompt, eventually getting to the point where we don't need a prompt at all. Joey is tracking the behavior of a client during play to determine how often hand flapping occurs under no demands. Joey divides the 10-minute observation period into 30-second intervals and marks whether hand flapping occurred at any time during each interval. After the session, Joey calculates the percentage of intervals in which the behavior occurred. What type of measurement procedure is Joey using? So another measurement question. And let's start with what are we measuring? We are measuring the behavior of a client during play, and specifically how often hand flapping occurs during play with no demands. We then want to know, is it continuous or discontinuous? Well, here we have intervals, right? Because we have a 10-minute observation period into 30-second intervals. So whenever you're taking a small subset of time or small sample of time and breaking it into intervals, that is a good indication that you're likely dealing with a discontinuous measurement procedure. So let's then see, how do we measure the behavior? Well, it says Joey is marking whether hand flapping occurred at any time during each interval. So if we have intervals from 1 to 30 seconds, and if the behavior happens for 1 second out of that 30, and it counts, what type of measurement are we using? A, partial interval recording. Yes, with partial interval recording, if the behavior happens at any point during the interval, it counts as a response. Compare that to B, whole interval recording, where the behavior has to happen the whole time or the whole interval. So if we have 30-second intervals, that behavior has to happen a full 30 seconds. That is not the case here. If the behavior happens at any point during the 30 seconds, it counts. C, momentary time sampling. This is going to take place, or this is going to measure if the behavior happens at 30 seconds, at the end of each interval. That's not what we're doing either. We're looking at the whole 30 seconds and seeing, does the behavior happen at all? And then D, frequency recording, is simply going to be a count, and that's not what we're doing here. We're using interval tracking, and we're taking note of when this behavior occurs at any point during the 30 seconds. So the type of measurement procedure we're using is A, partial interval recording. Julie is teaching a client to wash their hands. Julie starts by teaching the client to turn on the faucet while completing the remaining steps for them. Once the client masters turning on the faucet, Julie teaches the next step, applying soap. What type of chaining procedure is Julie using? Very straightforward chaining question, right? What do we know about Julie and how she's teaching? We know she's teaching a client to wash hands. She teaches the first step of turning on the faucet and then completes the remaining steps for them. So essentially, the client has to do the first step and then is prompted through the rest of the steps. When they master the first step, they then start learning the next step. So we're going from step 1 to step 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3, so on and so forth. So what type of chaining are we using? Well, clearly we're using a forward chaining. We're teaching that first step first and then prompting through. We then teach first and second, prompt through, first, second, third, prompt through. It's not backwards chaining because that would be the reverse, where we start with, let's say, the fifth step, and then teach the fifth and the fourth, so on. Task analysis is how we create the task chain, not how we teach it. And then total task chaining is teaching all of the steps. The type of chaining procedure Julie is using is a forward chaining. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.